What is going on, everyone? This is Miles with Windows Central Gaming, and welcome to the 80th episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Today, I am stoked to be joined by Windows Central's very own Jez Corden for our big comeback episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Jez, my dude, how are you doing on this fine Saturday?
I'm a little bit hungover, if I'm being honest with you. I got into the ROM yesterday on the Xbox 2 podcast, and I'm feeling a little bit delicate, but we're gonna push through it. We're gonna push through it and have a good show, regardless.
I saw you guys getting ready to go live. Then I saw you post the picture of the bottle of rum, and my first thought was, "Oh no." Jez told me he was going to be on tomorrow, but he's going to be too hungover to hang out. But I'm glad you made it. You had some fun, but not too much fun. You're able to function. Did your family end up making you help with trees this morning? I know you were talking about potentially doing some yard work.
No, we were gonna.
Hey.
I was telling Miles that I'd arranged to go and chop down wood because we have no gas in Europe anymore. So we're reverting to the medieval ages, and we're gonna burn wood for warmth this winter. However, it was raining, and it's not fun to chop down trees in the rain. So we deferred it for now until another time. But yeah,
nothing like some hungover yard work to really kick off your weekend, right? Huh?
Yeah, right.
Just dodged a bullet there. Well, I'm stoked to have you. Obviously, the last several weeks I've been away. I've been moving. Maybe if you stick around towards the end, I'll tell the nightmare story of the move, because it's been a saga that just keeps on giving. It's been exhausting. It's been my roughest move ever, but I'm settled in. I'm here. I'm on Xbox Chaturdays with my pal Jez, and we have a lot to dive into. We're going to be talking about the death of Google Stadia. We're going to be talking about some rumored changes to Halo Infinite's future. We're going to be talking about PlayStation being a little concerned about the Activision Blizzard acquisition yet again. We're going to be talking about the first $70 Xbox release and so much more. But before we get into all of that, for the folks who maybe don't know, and I'm sure pretty much everyone here does, Jez, let people know who you are and where they can find you.
I'm Jez Corden from Windows Central. You can find me on Twitter at Jez Corden, JZCorden. That's pretty much it. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know.
Twitter, Windows Central.
If you were a food connoisseur, be sure to follow Jez. He posts a lot of intoxicating, enticing meals every single day that make you never want to eat again. Some quick housekeeping. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I really like baked beans, right? Baked beans is my jam, and it's sort of a British thing. I've become aware of over time that it's mainly the British who are obsessed with Heinz baked beans, as far as I'm aware, at least in the Western world. And I had stomach problems for the longest time. I'm not even sure what it was. I think it might have been an ulcer or something. But I had to cut loads of foods out of my diet, so I couldn't eat bread. I couldn't eat beans. I couldn't eat like all kinds of random foods, any kind of cereal. And I was scared, Miles. I was scared that I'd never be able to eat beans on toast again. However, the last few weeks, I seem to have gotten miraculously better. And I started having beans again. And I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't make me ill anymore. So I'm over the moon.
This isn't to downplay the UK or anything like that, but I feel like if you do eat beans on toast consistently, it makes sense that your body would start to shut down. You know, it's every time I see you post pictures, I'm like, that's not a meal. That's like putting spaghetti in a sandwich. It's overkill. All right.
That's something British people do as well. Actually.
What is going on over there? What is happening? What do you?
Did you not see my spaghetti on toast picture? That wasn't even off the internet. That was my photograph of my dinner. Do you not see this spaghetti on toast? That's a thing British people eat, unironically.
Beans on toast, spaghetti on toast. Oh my goodness! Oh, you're opening my eyes to a whole new world. That
there's also such a thing as a toast sandwich in Britain.
I'm sorry. Explain a toast sandwich to me. Is it bread sandwiched in between bread?
Yeah, but like dipped in olive oil maybe, or something. I don't know. But yeah,
I'm
toast sandwich.
sorry,
Look it
a
up.
toast sandwich? Is
Yeah,
this another
it's good.
British delicacy?
Yeah, it like adds some texture to a regular sandwich if you haven't got any filler, you know.
All right, Jez, I'm gonna make a trip to the UK, and we're gonna do a circuit of all of this British food, and I'm gonna post my impressions of all of these British foods because come on, well, can we get a little flavor? Is that illegal in the UK or what? What's going on over
You
there?
put stuff on the beans like black pepper or Worcestershire sauce, stuff like that. A bit of Marmite, you know.
Oh man, oh I love it, love
Oh
it.
man.
So some quick housekeeping. Xbox Chaturdays, the time has moved slightly. So we're still going to be going live on Saturdays, but we're going to be going live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time instead of 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're joining us live today, this was the first episode that is shifted because my time zone has shifted a little bit as well. And, I don't want to get up at the crack of dawn on my Saturday. So pushing the show forward 1 hour to compensate for the time difference. Jez, let's get into it. Let's get right into it. Quick shout out to all the amazing people joining us. We have over 100 people in the channel already. If you're digging the show, hit the like button, share it out. We got a lot of amazing support from people like Sergeant Rake, Yodani, Nick W, Mr. Joanna Dark. All right, let's start with this. This is a weird way to start the show, starting on kind of a negative note, but Nick W asks, what's the worst game that you've ever played? Jez, what's the worst game you've ever played?
Oh man, that's a tough question. And it's kind of like, I've played a lot of these sort of Steam meme games, which are sort of like, they're unfinished or they're purposely bad, or
Yes.
they're just made by a single guy screwing around in Unity. So like, I'm not going to count those. So let's count like actual releases. I mean, I played a lot of games, so there's probably something worse than this. But in recent memory, I was stunned by how horrible Biomutant felt to play.
Yeah, I remember that was kind of a controversial one.
Yeah,
Because
some people seem to like it and support it. Like maybe they like the world, or because it had some cool character designs, right? That's basically all it had. I felt like the gameplay, the combat was just horrible. I hated it. I just hated it, and I was just like, I can't play this anymore. I just can't. That's like a recent one that I can remember off the top of my head. I'm sure there's worse things that I've played. There is something else that's rattling around in my brain that I just remember thinking this is just horrible. Balan Wonderworld or Wonderland or whatever it's called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, that's one I've never played personally, but it's one that comes up in a lot of people's lists of
Horrible.
quintessentially terrible video games.
Awful game.
Did you finish
Balan
it?
Wonderland. Hell no. It's just horrible. I was like, my time is worth way more than this. I could do anything else. I could go and trim the grass. I could go and watch paint dry. Balan Wonderland or Wonderworld or wherever it is, just terrible. Irredeemably bad that you can't even recommend to anyone. So
It's
those
one
are
of
two
those
games I
games
can
I'm
think
just
of in recent
morbidly
memory.
curious to try because of all of the things I've heard about it being so terrible. Friend of the show, Jeff Grubb, I think he was kind of forced into reviewing it as almost like a meme, a community push. And yeah, his impressions, his review of that title were not that great. For me, I don't typically like to be mean, but I think the worst game I've ever played, again in recent memory, I'm sure there's maybe worse. The beta for Resident Evil Re:Verse. That
Oh,
to me, that was one
yeah,
of the
that was
few
bad.
times I've played something and said to myself, "This needs to be canceled." This is, I don't know what anyone on this team was going for here. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good to play. How are you using the RE engine and making something that's so ugly and so clunky? And the overall balance of the game was a complete nightmare. It was a complete mess. I walked away from that beta so unbelievably disappointed by what they were trying to present there. Obviously, it's been delayed a lot since then, and there's been no new trailers, no new information, but it's dropping with the Resident Evil Gold Edition. So I think out of obligation, they're just trying to quietly drop that because I don't think anyone who played it was very excited about it. And again, considering Capcom has been on such a hot streak, I could not believe how bad that felt to play. It was appalling because it's on paper, all of these all-star Resident Evil characters coming together in like a brawler. That could be fun, that could be silly, but man, dude, if you didn't get a chance to play it, I'm really curious to see what the conversations will be when that drops in October because that was the worst multiplayer game I've ever played. I've played most of them. Sergeant Rake, who's been a channel member for 12 months, a whole year. Welcome back, Miles. Hope you and Jez are having an excellent Saturday. Much love, dudes. Appreciate you. Mr. Joanna Dark, who's been a channel member for almost 2 years, 23 months. My God. Welcome back, Miles, the GOAT. And then, hello, Jez. Do you think Google and Sony could team up? Google would provide the Stadia tech and help on the mobile side. Oh my God, the ultimate dream team, the dynamic duo, PlayStation and Google teaming up to destroy Xbox once and for all? I think there's a timeline where that happens?
I think it's certainly vaguely, maybe, sort of, kind of, no, probably not.
No.
I mean, PlayStation games, they're built on x86 architecture, which, as far as I'm aware, Stadia games aren't. So they'd have to port all their games to Stadia's platform, unless Google can adapt their services for x86. I mean, it's certainly possible, I suppose, but I think it would make a lot of sense for me because obviously this cloud gaming stuff, I think it's going to be a thing. I don't think it's ever going to be the main way people play games, but it's going to be a supplementary thing, and it's going to be a thing that people start to expect to be there. Especially when Microsoft starts selling Xbox games direct, because they are going to do that. Eventually, you will just be able to buy the game outright, even if it's not an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So, I think in that scenario, some games are going to do really well in cloud. I mean, I can't see Call of Duty doing particularly well on cloud because it's very twitchy and very latency sensitive. So, like, I think more likely Call of Duty Mobile is where people play Call of Duty on phone. However, Diablo 4, with its fixed camera perspective, is very sort of, it's very good for the video encoder because, it makes, when the camera perspective is fixed, it seems like it doesn't have to like completely update the image because they downloads part of the image once and then that tree moves with the camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to like reorient the stream constantly because it's not 3D. When you're moving the camera around, it has to update the whole image constantly. So yeah, there'll be some games that will really blow up on xCloud, and I think if Sony doesn't have an answer to that, I think it's potentially problematic for them because right now PlayStation Now is not the answer. It's really not. It's just not good enough. But Stadia probably is more approaching what could be considered as good enough. So who knows? Maybe they'll partner with Amazon Luna instead.
Hey, there's one that's still alive and kicking. We're going to be diving more into the Stadia stuff. I want to get to a super chat real quick from my good pal, trusted friend, supportive colleague, Randall Thorn 19, who says, the worst game I have ever played is easily Pokemon Sword and Shield. Easily the worst ever. Toxic Rand. Rand coming in with a take as delicious as a toast sandwich. No style, no flavor, no substance. Get out of here, Rand. All right, Jez. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about one of the biggest stories of the week, and that is Google officially announcing that it is laying Stadia, its cloud streaming service, to rest. Let's take a moment of silence to pour one out for Google because Stadia is gone. As of January 2023, you will no longer be able to enjoy the benefits or your library of Google Stadia titles. So before we dive into what this means for the future of cloud streaming, what this means for Google, how did this news hit you? Was this a surprise to you in particular?
Nah, I wasn't surprised. It was just, it's just obvious. It was obvious that was going to happen. You know, there's just no way for Stadia to compete with the exclusives that are going on. Like, there's no way for Stadia to compete with the exclusives going into Xbox Game Pass. There's just no way. You know what can they possibly do? They shut down all their internal studios, and a lot of their exclusives were sort of second party and sort of smaller indie game titles that they're not those attention grabbing sort of things. The AAA games that did arrived really late, which again aren't the sort of headline grabbing kind of games that you need to grow a service. They did practically no marketing. They did very little integration with their existing services. Like where was the integration with YouTube that was promised a million years ago? Never happened. A lot of that stuff just didn't happen. At the same time, I was a little bit like, I was thinking about what are the negatives here, because it's sort of almost a criticism of cloud streaming as a paradigm, right? It's sort of like, oh snap, nobody wants this, you know,
Yeah.
Nobody wants this as a platform, you know, and maybe that's an argument that can be made, you know, maybe it just doesn't work. But I think that's why Xbox in official communications, they always describe cloud gaming as supplementary.
Yeah.
They never say we don't expect cloud to replace PC gaming, we don't expect cloud to replace console gaming. We expect it to be a supplementary service in situations where it makes sense, you know. If your girlfriend's taken over the TV, which frequently happens to me, I can play cloud game in bed, you know, or something like that. And still get my Xbox achievements or continue my progress. And you know, so some games, like we said earlier, some games don't work that well in cloud with today's technology. Call of Duty, I wouldn't play Call of Duty or Halo Infinite with the setup I've got, you know. Maybe the campaign at a stretch, but not multiplayer. Certainly not. You know, it just wouldn't be competitive. That being said, there are tons of games that do work really great on cloud. Turn-based games, strategy games, generally slower paced kind of games. They work really well on cloud. Isometric games work well. Said earlier about Diablo 4. You know, so I think the main purpose that Stadia served was to give my early xCloud a sort of benchmark to look at, because I know in the early days Microsoft was like looking at Stadia as the benchmark. It's like we gotta get xCloud at least this good, and now I think internally they consider themselves to have exceeded that. Although, you know, user experience may vary. You know, there's still a school of thought that Stadia provides a better experience than xCloud. In some situations, at least. But Microsoft looks at NVIDIA GeForce Now as the benchmark for you know, the video encoding technology and stuff like that. So I think the competition they brought from a technological perspective is very valuable. But Google's just kind of a lame company, and I'm kind of glad they're not going to be in gaming, because the way they've treated developers with the death of Stadia is just a small insight to the kind of mentality they have. You know, they were never in this for the love of gaming. They were never in this for the love of developers. They were in this because they saw gaming and thought, we can do that. We can make some money on that, without being really serious about it. They didn't deserve any of it. They didn't deserve developers. They didn't deserve any of it. So I'm glad they're gone. It sucks for the devs. It sucks for people who are going to lose their progress. I saw a headline of someone who had 6,000 hours in Red Dead Redemption 2, and they're going to lose all their progress, right? If Rockstar doesn't provide some kind of save transfer service. But I think with the death of Stadia, this is, you know, this is Google never being in core gaming, and I'm totally on board with that. I hope we never see them in core gaming ever again. They just don't deserve to be there. So, yeah, that's my whole take on that situation. But what's your take? Did you use Stadia much? Did you try it out?
I did try it out, yes, because as these services are coming to the forefront and more people are considering them, we had xCloud, we had Google Stadia, and especially early on, Stadia's tech was way better than xCloud's tech. the latency on when xCloud first hit the market and you could use it, generally speaking, even when you had a really solid connection via Wi-Fi, was noticeable. I remember trying to play Sea of Thieves with 4G LTE at the time in my car, and it was an awful experience, like unbelievably bad. I couldn't move the camera because the delay was so extreme that I was overcompensating and then just spinning in circles. Um, and a lot of people, when you look at the Stadia tech, they were saying that the latency was so much smaller. And since then, like you said, Xbox wasn't going to just stand by and let that be the case. They've been working to improve that tech, and now we're in a situation where the latency for xCloud is dramatically improved. The overall experience, the resolution, the frame rate, all of that is dramatically improved, which is huge. We have more powerful hardware on that end. But that being said, the moment that Google shuttered its internal studios and shuttered any chance of first-party content for Stadia, that's the moment I knew that it was only a matter of time. While the tech was cool, they were trying to figure out if maybe people were just interested enough to help float it, is kind of what it felt like. Like, oh, if we get developers, maybe they can bring some stuff and we can keep people happy enough to keep this thing afloat. But I think with the recession worries and with the lack of support, I think they just said, okay, we can use the tech for something else. Clearly the tech is solid, but Stadia as a platform, let's just shut it down. It didn't catch on in the way that we want, and we're not going to support it. So again, I know there's a lot of brutal takes, and I don't care if people are brutal to Google, because Google historically has been pretty brutal in the business world. So there are a lot of reasons to poke fun at this. And like you said, as gaming gets bigger, there are more and more, and maybe this is a harsh word, nefarious players. There are more nefarious interests coming into gaming because of the money that's being made, not because of the developers, not because of the games, the projects, but because they can come into this space and there's a potential to make a ton of money. And as more and more players get, invest because of those reasons, we're going to see more and more Stadias come. People who come in, think they can do this, think they can just throw money around and make stuff happen. And thankfully, in this case, if that was the actual case behind the scenes, it did not pan out for Google, and Google's backing away from gaming. So, yeah, was not surprised in the slightest that this shut down. Quite frankly, I'm surprised it took this long because I feel like interest online for Stadia has been mild from the jump. I don't think there was ever a huge interest in Stadia, primarily because the business model was bad. I think that's the biggest flaw of Stadia. The fact that you could only buy full price games and only stream them on the cloud, I think was just not a well thought out business model. So it's gone, Jez. In January.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Rip in
One
peace.
thing, I do want to give Google credit for one thing, because they announced as part of this that any hardware or software purchases that you've made with Stadia will be refunded, which I don't know about you, but I personally did not see that coming. I thought anyone who invested in this would be completely out of money. Sorry, good luck to you. But the fact that Google is refunding people, from what I've seen online, thousands of dollars worth of purchases, I think that is at least the decency that shows like, hey, we respected your investment. We understand that you're disappointed that we didn't follow through, but we're at least respecting the money that you gave us. And that, to me, feels very un-Google. All right, Jez. So now that Stadia is out of the picture, we have one less contender in the space. Now, a lot of people are looking at xCloud, Xbox Game Pass. And like you touched on, people are saying, oh, shoot, OnLive shut down. Oh, shoot, Stadia shut down. Is there an interest in cloud gaming? We have Amazon Luna, but again, much like Stadia, I don't see anyone talking about Amazon Luna. So I don't know what the future of Amazon Luna holds. Do you think there are any concerns for the future of game streaming following the shuttering of Stadia?
It's it's hard to say. The problem with cloud streaming is you need this sort of massive cloud infrastructure globally to do it, right? You need this massive global cloud infrastructure to do it. So there's pretty much there's only a few companies really out there that can do this reliably. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft,
Yeah.
there are other companies that can sort of do it to a lesser scale. I mean, we've seen Sony do it to some degree with PlayStation Now, but they don't have enough servers to really deliver that latency proposition that cloud gaming needs to be at least supplemental. That's the expectation now, is that it's supplemental, but unless you're giving a minimum level of quality of service, it's not even worth doing. And I think, there's a lot of constraints on the potential growth of this right now, from the chip shortage, supply chain issues, China's zero COVID policy, continued global economic upheaval. There's that aspect as well, which is going to, create instability where you would need stability to grow an infrastructure like this that cloud would need. That being said, I think it's also just kind of inevitable. It's, as the technology does improve, there's a lot of convenience and value you can potentially get with cloud gaming. You don't have to buy an Xbox Series X, which costs £500. You also don't have to buy a £350 memory card or whatever, however much it costs nowadays for the top end one. Anyway, you don't have to buy peripherals. If you play it on a phone and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of added value. And when they're bringing the family plan in a few weeks, even more added value. And it's on 2022 Samsung smart TVs now, but I know, and I've heard, and I've got it on good authority, that it's going to roll out to 2021 Samsung smart TVs as well. And it's also, they're in talks with other TV manufacturers as well to roll it out there. They're building their own streaming console, codenamed Keystone, which I've heard is targeting $99. So for some markets where consoles are prohibitively expensive, there's a lot of value to be offered here if the quality of service is there, right? So I don't think Stadia's death is necessarily an example of cloud gaming not being a thing ever, but it's certainly an example of gaming is a lot harder than trillion-dollar companies want to give it credit for, and Google wasn't serious enough from the outset to have made it work. You could argue, I don't think Amazon's serious enough either. So, Luna's still only available in one country, and sort of Amazon just, again, they're another company that they just want to do it because they can. They don't care about gaming. They're not bringing anything new and fresh to the table. They're just trying to throw their money around and make money. It's not like Microsoft, who have innovated over the years. They created Xbox Live. They created things that we take for granted now, like achievements and the whole concept of social gaming and having a friends list and stuff like that. Connected across multiple games. Microsoft was innovated there because Xbox is run by gamers, or at least it is now. There was the darkest time in Xbox's timeline was when it was run by suits and accountants and not gamers, and I'm already seeing it with Blizzard. Mike Ibarra is a hardcore gamer, and now he's running Blizzard. All the changes that have been made to World of Warcraft is things that I've been hoping they'd do for years. And Mike Ibarra is an actual gamer. And lo and behold, good decisions are being made around some of Blizzard's games now. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of fight Amazon puts up with it. But they haven't even launched Luna outside of the United States yet. So how serious are they really with it? I don't know. The Amazon have published some of their games, but the games aren't particularly great. They enjoyed this artificial hype cycle because they paid their Twitch streamers to push it. Lost Ark and New World, is it called? New World was trash. It was a trash game. I played New World for 5 minutes, and I was like, this game is going to be dead in 2 months. And I was right, because it's inferior to competing MMOs in every possible way, So how serious are Amazon as well? They're throwing their money around. They spend a ridiculous amount of money on New World, and it's mediocre at best. And I think Amazon Luna is gonna go the way of Google Stadia as well. I think the best hope for cloud streaming is that Amazon or Google provide the tech for a real gaming company to do it, like Sony. I think that's the best hope for cloud gaming in terms of competition. But regulators will probably look at some of this stuff and be like, "Wow, Microsoft really could dominate the industry here." But at the same time, it's not Microsoft's fault. Everyone else is garbage. Not Microsoft's fault.
It's one of those situations where, as you touched on, it proves that it is not easy to get into this space. And really, if you want to have a successful service, you want to have a successful platform in particular, you need to do everything right. Every single component of this needs to be thoughtful, needs to be catered towards your audience. And when you try to decide what your audience wants for them, as we've seen with the Kinect, as we've seen with the launch of the Xbox One, that doesn't work. That approach never works. You need to figure out what the audience wants and deliver that. Deliver an experience that people have wanted that doesn't exist yet. And in some ways, Stadia was promising that, but also Stadia was very headstrong in the way that it was approaching that. And it wasn't looking at stuff like xCloud. It wasn't looking at other services. It wasn't looking at established platforms. It was just trying to use its tech, use its weight to establish itself. And that's just not going to work. And so I do think regulators will look at this and there will be concerns, because now, like you touched on, unless Amazon Luna does something completely different, unless they completely fundamentally change their approach, I don't see it catching on in a big way. And that's not to downplay what the team's doing. That's just, there's no energy or excitement right now for Amazon Luna. And that's not a good place to be when you're trying to build a platform. Amazon, again, is huge, and they're trying to use that weight and that tech to force themselves in the space. And again, I don't want to speak for them because I don't know the people behind the scenes, but to me, it feels like there's money to be made, so that's why we're doing it. We're not doing this because, again, we love gaming, we love the space. We're doing it because we can make money, and we have the tech to do it. So let's stick our toes in, see what happens. If it catches on, cool. If it doesn't, then we didn't spend all that much money. And that's kind of what it feels like, is they're spending a lot of money comparatively. But when you look at the big pockets of Google and Amazon, it's not that much in the grand scheme of things, and it's a hit that they can take. And I think if you want to be a major player in the space right now, when all of the major players are bringing it, all of the major players are in here to make you invest in their ecosystem. You can't be fair weather, and that's why I think Stadia failed, and that's why I think Amazon Luna, unless it changes its approach, will fail as well. But I also agree that I don't think this means the future of cloud streaming is doomed. I think it is a perfect supplemental service, maybe way distant future. I'm 10 plus years. Maybe it is the main way a lot of people play games. But we are still in the infancy of this tech in a lot of ways, and it's still in most markets. Sure, if you live in the US or you live somewhere with high-speed internet, that works. But a lot of the world and even a lot of the US doesn't have the infrastructure to support cloud streaming. So it just can't be the primary way a majority of people play. But when you're Microsoft, when you're Xbox, you are using it as a additional value proposition for people who subscribe to Game Pass. And like you said, if you have people over, you want to sit on the toilet, play some Elden Ring, whatever it might be, you have that option, which it's a great option. I don't only want to play Elden Ring on my phone, but you know what? Sometimes I would like the option, and I think that's why Xbox is seeing growth and succeeding in that space where others aren't. So do you think anyone has the legitimate potential to even compete with Xbox now? Is there anyone who can at all compete in the cloud gaming space with Xbox at this point?
I don't think so, but you could argue that nobody needs to right now. Like, if it is a supplementary kind of thing for the foreseeable future and a niche kind of thing, maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, the only decent VR headset with cordless VR headset is Facebook's, right? Does it matter that nobody else makes a cordless VR headset? Not really, because nobody wants them anyway. So it's like I see the American government freaking out about Facebook buying some VR fitness app, and it's like, who cares? Let them buy it. No one's going to use it anyway. So I don't know. I think what happens is Sony gets their hands on some white label service. Maybe they do partner with Google to improve their stuff. I mean, we had that whole thing, Sony saying they were going to use Azure to improve their cloud services. And what happened with that? I don't know what the hell, what happened with that that was so weird.
And that was like a formal announcement, like, hey, guess what? We're buddies now. We're partnering. We understand we're in this together. And I wonder if there are some weird things behind the scenes that have shifted that business relationship.
Yeah. That was so strange. Like, Microsoft announced it with all this fanfare. Yeah. Microsoft announced all this stuff with fanfare, and then Sony was just like, don't say it out loud, about it.
We don't want to put out the projection that we need you, is basically what it felt like.
Yeah. The only other sort of competitor in the space really is GeForce Now. And obviously GeForce is doing really well, GeForce Now, but it's kind of hamstrung. And I think some aspects of GeForce's Now business model isn't great either. They're making the mistake, in my view, of lack of curation, I think. But I don't know. That's another discussion for another time.
GeForce Now is cool tech to me, but it's not presented as a platform, I think, is why unless you already know about it, they're doing nothing to make you know about GeForce Now. And I think that's the reason. If you have a dedicated gaming PC and you want that supplemental option, I think the tech of GeForce Now is great. I just don't think GeForce is trying to make it be a major thing. It doesn't feel like they care whether or not you use GeForce Now or not. It's just, here's an option, we have the tech to do it. Go nuts is really what it feels like.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about GeForce Now. I've actually not tried it, so I'm kind of reluctant to. I'm going to download it right now. Screw it. I'm kind of reluctant to criticize it too much until I've actually tried it for myself. So I'm gonna literally download GeForce Now right this second. But it's either way, it doesn't have the exclusives, right? And Microsoft isn't gonna allow for their games, their exclusives, to be on GeForce Now anyway. So at the end of the day, you're gonna have a choice between a streaming service with exclusives and streaming service without exclusives. But there's also Valve. Valve has their Steam Link stuff, and Valve has shown itself to be a disruptor. Valve is a disruptor. And the Steam Deck is disruptive. It's going to become disruptive, I think. I think they're kind of bottlenecked again by the chip shortage, but Steam is a big disruptor, and Steam's another player that I could see coming up with some amazing algorithmic tech that actually makes a video encoder super powerful. There's just something about Valve where they seem to have this sort of magic power to do things that sort of push the envelope. So who knows? There's all kinds of disruption that could come from all kinds of different companies, and as network infrastructure improves and internet speeds go up, and I got 1 gigabyte down now in Germany and in Britain, and it's not even really significantly more expensive. Like, I can't even imagine, like, when I was a kid, I remember getting 10 megabyte down for the first time and being like, oh my God, this is so fast.
Just having that blow your mind, going from dial up to cable for the first time. Just, oh. And there's probably people listening like, what's dial up? That was when you had to plug in a phone line, a land phone line, and listen to a dial tone to be able to play Diablo 2 on a PC. Like, that's what the internet used to be. We've come a long way, and now I have 1.2 gigabytes, and I'm complaining. I'm like, I'm only downloading at 700 megabits per second. What the hell? So it's interesting. I do agree. I think there is potential for other people to come in the space. Steam seems positioned well because of their tech, because of their established platform on PC. And the fact that at one point in time they seem to invest in those ideas with stuff like Steam Remote Play Together, which nobody has that. And I don't think enough people talk about how cool that tech is and how well that tech works. And you can do that with most games. And it's something I've been banging on the drum, like with Xbox. You are pushing a cloud division. You are spending a lot of money on cloud. You are putting a lot of cool local Game Pass, local only multiplayer titles in Xbox Game Pass. Why don't you have that option? And I think there are areas and avenues where Valve is positioned, better than most to maybe dip their toes in. You have the iterative, because we know there's going to be more versions of the Steam Deck. The first Steam Deck is not the only Steam Deck. They're going to iterate on that constantly. And if you can look at the Logitech G Cloud and these other cloud-only devices, and you can say, guess what? We have a device that's about the same price. Not only does it have native hardware, but we also have our own streaming tech. And we also have Left 4 Dead 3 as an exclusive or whatever, if they ever decide to do a trilogy for anything. That's a way to compete. That's a way to get people looking and say, oh dang, okay, Valve is taking this seriously. Let's check out what Valve is doing. So of the people in the space right now, I think Valve is the most primed if they want to, which is the biggest question. I don't know if they have any interest right now in even doing it. But like you said, there are wizards behind the scenes with some of that tech. The Steam Deck OS, complete technical wizardry. That thing is so good. Has so many features baked in. You can cap your frame rate. You can put FSR on any title you're playing. There are so many cool things just baked into the operating system for that device that makes it so versatile. So, quick shout out to all the amazing people joining us live. If this is your first time tuning into Xbox Chaturdays, we are live every Saturday at the new and improved time of 1 p.m. Eastern. If you're listening on audio services, dig in the show, leave us a review as well. I'm going to get to some super chats real quick. We got DS Omen who says, Jez, what do you think Xbox would have looked like in a timeline where Windows Phone was successful? I wonder if Xbox would be mobile focused. RIP Windows Phone.
I don't think they'd be mobile focused, but I do think it would really help xCloud if Windows Phone did survive. Because one of the issues they've got with xCloud and Xbox Game Pass on Google Play is that they have to follow all of Google's rules, right? Which makes xCloud less profitable. Then the games are served through xCloud on Android, on Google Play, they have no microtransactions in them. They have to have their stores ripped out, which is awful for monetization, right? I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we actually see the Google Play version of Xbox Game Pass go away. And once Microsoft gets to a point where everyone's used to using it on their phones, they'll take it out of Google Play and just slap it on the browser and just be like, because of Google's rules, we can't make this business viable. So I wouldn't be surprised about that. So if they did have Windows Phone, obviously they wouldn't have to follow any of those rules. Like on iOS, Xbox Game Pass isn't there at all because of Apple's rules. So yeah, I think I don't think Xbox will be mobile focused. I think they'd still be doing the console stuff, but I do think it would really accelerate xCloud if they did have their own phone platform. Alas, they do not.
Alas, pour one out for the Windows Phone. Doovy says, with Stadia done and Sony being around $64 stock price, could this hurt the Microsoft acquisition? A reason for the regulators to say no. Doovy, hold on to that. Hang out with us. We're gonna be talking about that. There's been some developments from our good pal Jim Ryan and Google regarding the acquisition. So we will touch on that, I promise. Happy Cloud Gamer says, I still think cloud gaming will take over someday. Again, I've said this countless times before. Convenience, as we've seen time and time again with every single industry in the world, will win over anything else. If you can give us a service that's good enough and is convenient and it's consistent, then yeah. If cloud gaming gets to that point where anyone can play on any device and it's consistent, but yeah, why on earth would you spend $1,000 for a PC, $1,000 plus, or $500-ish for a console? And so if it does get to that point, which we're a ways away from getting to that point, yeah, why not? Like we've seen with streaming services. nobody wants to put a disc in. I have a bookshelf full of discs here for all of my games. I have bought digital copies of games I own physically because I don't want to get up and put the disc in. All right? That's where we're at. So,
I did that with Wolfenstein, the New Colossus, because I had a review copy for it, and they were sending games on disc back then, and then I was like, man, I don't even want to get out of bed to plug this in, and that's when I realized I was done with discs. Wolfenstein, the New Colossus. Yeah.
I bought, I want to say 5 games physically on Xbox One. And then after that point, I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to do this. I don't want to do this. Dead Rising 3, I own physically. I have the day 1 edition of Dead Rising 3, but I still bought the digital edition just because it was easier. But yes, convenience is more important for the average consumer than anything else. And so, yes, again, I think there is a potential distant future where cloud gaming is just an everyday thing. Jez, I want to talk about a rating that dropped this week because it feels like every week there's a new Silent Hill rumor. Oh, shoot, Silent Hill leaked. Oh, shoot, Silent Hill's been confirmed. Oh, dang, Silent Hill's coming. And this is all stemmed from the reveal and subsequent cancellation of Silent Hills. Ever since that moment, the internet, the gaming community has been fixated on this idea of what could have been. What could have been Silent Hills, what could have been this weird, intense Silent Hill reimagining. And because of that, people want to see a new Silent Hill entry. And since then, it's been a long time. It's been a very long time since we've gotten anything Silent Hill related outside of pachinko machines, outside of skateboards, outside of hoodies. There's been a lot of branded merchandise in the world of Silent Hill, but not a new game. There's been a lot of things that suggest maybe Bloober Team is working on a Silent Hill. There's been reports that maybe multiple teams are working on Silent Hill projects. But this week, we got our first big development that lends official-ish credence to a new Silent Hill being on the horizon. And that is Silent Hill, the short message, has officially been listed on the South Korea Game Rating Board. So Silent Hill, the short message, is rated as a basically PC and console game. Kind of horror insider Dust Golem has talked about this using like SMS messages, like being able to link your phone and get messages about this game and related to this experience. And it also seems to be rated for PC and console. So this isn't necessarily just a weird mobile thing. So Dust Golem also suggests that this is maybe like a playable teaser in line with PT or Resident Evil 7, The Beginning Hour. So Jez, do you think we're finally getting a new Silent Hill? Do you think this is once and for all the confirmation that there is a Silent Hill game that does exist in some capacity, or what?
I don't care. I'm gonna say it. I don't care. I really don't care. And do you know why?
Why?
Because it ain't Team Silent. I don't think any studio, except for Kojima, will do Silent Hill any justice. Frankly, I think only Kojima and Kojima Productions has the vision to make a Silent Hill that is Silent Hill that also appeals to modern audiences. You need someone with the vision and the budget to do it.
Yes.
If you got Konami attached to it, budget's probably not that big, which means it's probably going to an indie dev like Bloober Team, as is the rumor. And I've got very, very, very low expectations. I would love to be wrong. Very much love to be wrong. But I don't think I am. I don't think I am, Mars. And I love Silent Hill. You know, Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3 at least. Silent Hill 4, kind of cool concept, but gameplay is not so great. Those invincible ghosts were just the most frustrating enemies in
oh,
the
that was
history
the
of game.
dumbest mechanic ever. Having to put a sword that you only have one of in the body of a ghost to keep it from just passing through walls and chasing you. Terrible. Terrible
I hate
idea.
that so much. But But it was a kind of cool concept. There's one part in Silent Hill 4 where you look through the hole in the wall, and the rabbit turns to face you, or it's been turned to face you. And I'm just like, my god, that is so damn creepy. So there's stuff in that game that was really, really cool. But yeah, I digress. All the other games since Silent Hill 4 have been horrible, except for PT.
Downpour, Silent Hill Downpour was one of the worst experiences I've had with the opening sequence of a video game. I remember just being in complete awe of how dumb the intro to Silent Hill Downpour was. You know, it had Korn on the soundtrack, which is okay, cool, whatever. Korn's cool, but that doesn't make a good Silent Hill game.
Kind of corny.
Yeah, like new metal in Silent Hill.
Korn is like almost a curse for video games. Every time Korn has been involved with the soundtrack of a video game, it's usually been bad.
They also did the too, right?
Yeah, they did Haze. So yeah, Haze was the Halo killer. I remember seeing a magazine calling Haze the Halo killer.
I remember going to, I think it was PAX, the year that was being demoed, and we got our swag bags, and they were giving out stuff, and there was a booth for Haze where you could go play Haze. And part of the marketing material for it, because if you're not familiar with Haze, the whole gimmick is it's a first-person shooter, but you do drugs, and it's trippy. And that was like the gimmick. So they gave you a little black container of mints, and then you would open it up, and it had like a cocaine mirror. It was like a cocaine vessel with mints in it as part of the marketing gimmick for Haze. And I was like, okay, that's the vibe of this game? Cool. But yes, Silent Hill has not had a good legacy for a long time. The originals, very important. Silent Hill 2, one of my favorite games of all time. One of the games that just completely and 100% solidified my love of horror video games. Silent Hill 2, such a great experience. We've all been waiting for the series to get a budget, because we've seen Silent Hill Homecoming and Silent Hill Downpour. They haven't gotten budgets. It's been clear that Konami's been scaling back on budgets. Then we see stuff like Metal Gear Survive. Then we see stuff like Contra Rogue Core. Even their soccer series has, it's clear that they're not putting a lot of money into these projects. And so that's my biggest fear, is that we're going to get a Silent Hill, but it's going to be typical Konami fare, where it's just, I don't want to say exploiting, but basically exploiting a passionate team, giving them no money, no resources to make a game. And they're doing it just because they love Silent Hill and want to try to make Silent Hill. That's my biggest concern of this whole thing. What I want to see is this game get a big budget. What I want to see is Konami actually care about some of my favorite IP, because Castlevania and Silent Hill are two of my favorite video game franchises of all time. We haven't got a Castlevania in an entire generation, Jez. The Xbox One generation had 0 Castlevanias. It also had 0 Silent Hill games. They've gone entire decades without giving a damn about these franchises, and that's rough. And so people ask, well, is it relevant? Couldn't someone like Kojima just come in and make a new IP? And that's honestly what I hope he's doing. I would rather him make a new IP than lean on Silent Hill anyway. So I gotta ask, if this is real, what would you want from a Silent Hill game in the year of our Lord 2022? What would we even want to see from this franchise that's been removed from the conversation for a decade, and the last time it was in the conversation, people didn't like it?
Sorry, I got distracted there by some interesting work-related things, which maybe we'll discuss on the show very shortly.
Oh,
can you repeat with the last bit what you just said?
Yes. So the main question was, what would you even want to see from Silent Hill in this timeline, in this current era?
What I don't want, right, and this is why I'm nervous about Bloober Team potentially doing it, I don't want a walking simulator. I'm sorry, walking simulators ain't scary. They're boring. If there's no vulnerability, and there's no reason to panic, really, because it just feels like you're in a sort of an advanced cutscene. You know, it's super boring. So I want to see Silent Hill that at least has some form of combat. You know, I want to be able to panic with a lead pipe. You know, and scavenge for ammo. I want it to be survival horror. You know, I want it to be survival horror. You can do sections which are sort of like meant to be super creepy. Like Resident Evil Village did it flawlessly. Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil Village almost like goes through every single horror trend in its different sections. You know, Resident Evil Village is a masterpiece in my opinion. It is the pinnacle of what, you know, horror games should be for me. It's like a celebration of the different horror game genres. But you know, yeah, if there's no combat in it, I ain't interested immediately out of the gate. Thankfully, Bloober did hire a combat designer, you know, if they are indeed making it. So it needs to be good, you know, and I think that's a tall order for Bloober Team.
Yeah, the Bloober Team's had a controversial series of releases. So again, there's the rumor is Bloober Team is doing one. Annapurna was reportedly involved with another one as well. And then again, I don't have any inside information on these projects, but at one point in time there was a reported 3 different Silent Hill games at least being discussed in some capacity. So the short message, it could be related to Silent Hill 2 remake, which I think, based on the conversations and speculation online right now, that's the most likely to actually be a real thing, or at least to be coming soon-ish. So it could be a teaser for that. And again, Silent Hill, the reason it's so near and dear to so many people is because of the ways it completely reinvented horror, completely established itself as this unique piece of horror media. And this is a tall order, but that's going to be what I expect from a new Silent Hill. It needs to come out and not be old Silent Hill, because I'm sorry, as much as I love the original Silent Hills, they don't work anymore. Like that idea, we've come so far from that, and that idea was only novel because of the fact that it was new, it was fresh, it subverted expectations. And so Silent Hill needs to be able to do that. It needs to come out and pay tribute to its identity while also completely transforming our expectations of horror. And any team do that? I don't know. I would love to
That's
see.
That's what PT did, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly what PT did. PT it bled Silent Hill. It bled Silent Hill. And it had, even in this tiny little space that they built this demo in, it completely subverted expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Completely. It was masterful, you know. And that's why I said the only person I trust to handle Silent Hill is Kojima. It's the only person, you know, the only team on Earth. I wouldn't even trust the Resident Evil team with Silent Hill. As much as I love Resident Evil, they're not the most subtle.
They're very different beasts. I would say Resident Evil 7, to me, Resident Evil 7 came the closest that we've ever gotten to completely reimagining the franchise in a way that was essential. Resident Evil was struggling to find its identity. Its old tropes weren't working anymore, and Resident Evil came in and said, you know what? What if we just throw away everything that Resident Evil was on the surface, but keep core elements? So even though it doesn't look like Resident Evil, it doesn't sound like Resident Evil, the art style is completely different. What if we present a game that when you pick it up and play, it reminds you of playing Resident Evil 1. It reminds you of those classic games without being those classic games. And I thought that was beautiful. I thought Resident Evil 7 at the time was that to me, that is the reason that Capcom is doing what they're doing now. Because they took the risk on that series. It paid off, and they said, let's do that for every single franchise we have. Let's go back to them. Let's figure out what makes them great while also pushing them forward. And I think that is such a difficult balance. It's hard to respect the past while looking towards the future, because too often we get trapped in these it has to be this. It was that, like Halo, I think, is the prime example, and we'll talk more about Halo, of being too grounded in what the past was. being too afraid to push into the future. And Resident Evil 7 wasn't that. Resident Evil 7 said, let's go. No holds barred. We are going to make the weirdest Resident Evil game, the scariest Resident Evil game that's ever been made. And it's going to be first person. Sorry. All the third person people, we're mixing it up. And I thought that was just, that courage to me was so important. And that's, again, what I'm going to want to see. And that's going to be what I expect from a new Silent Hill. Because as you touched on, few people can handle it. And if you're going to do a Silent Hill, you can't be afraid to be weird. Silent Hill has always been weird. Always been delivering visuals and themes that you wouldn't expect, and that can't be lost. So, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we'll get a new Silent Hill, and I'm hopeful that it won't be absolutely terrible. But we'll just have to wait and see. All right, let me get to some super chats real quick here. We got Doovie. Is it Doovie? Is Doovie the only one here? Yes, Doovie, who says, Microsoft announces acquisition January 18th, 2022. Stadia shutting down January 18th, 2023. Coincidence? Let the conspiracies begin. Yeah, like I said, and we're going to talk about this more, but the moment that Microsoft started putting money, big money into acquisitions is the moment where Google said, all right, we're out. You could see it. It correlated directly with the Bethesda and Blizzard acquisitions. We're like, okay, we're not going to spend that money in gaming. We're just not. And so it's curious to see what those implications mean for the future. But first, Jez, there's been a little controversy this week on the Xbox and Bethesda camp because there's been a lot of drama, a lot of conversations with The Last of Us and with PlayStation charging $70 for video games, and how can you really charge $70 for a remake? Can you charge $70 for games in general? There's been a lot of people praising Microsoft's approach and of keeping games $60, smart delivery, and then quietly, Skyrim Anniversary Edition released on the Nintendo Switch this week, and they have the audacity, Jez Corden, to charge $70 for the digital version of Skyrim on Nintendo Switch. What on earth is going on there? What? It's $50 on Xbox, so it's a $20 increase for the Switch digital. I've seen physical versions of games on Switch cost a little bit more. Bethesda's out here charging $70 for a port of Skyrim on Switch. What's up with that?
I don't know. I actually fired off a PR email to Microsoft about it, but I still think Bethesda and Microsoft operate fairly independently of each other, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people blame the Nintendo tax. You know, Nintendo potentially charges. I don't know how much Nintendo charges for developers, but clearly, I feel like some kind of cost is being passed on to consumers here, you know?
Because we've seen there's been some Capcom titles. I think a few, like the Devil May Cry HD collection, I think was $5 or $10 more on Switch versus the other platforms as well. And like I said, it's $50 on PC and Xbox. So this is clearly just a Switch-only scenario. But it's just been really interesting to see that kind of blow up with this kind of uproar regarding $70 price points.
The Anniversary Edition stuff, a lot of the enhancements, they're coming for free, right? To the base game.
No.
Some of this, no? The resolution and texture stuff? I thought that was going to be a free update. And then, I don't know.
Because they're adding features like fish. So the Anniversary thing, again, I think it's included with Game Pass. And maybe on Xbox it's a free upgrade?
I have no idea. Is it even out yet? I thought it was already out with the fishing.
Yeah, it just came out on Switch. So it's been out.
Right.
The Anniversary Edition has been out, I think, for
2021.
About a year. Yeah, so it's been out for about a year. They dropped it on Switch recently. for $70, and it's just been a funny thing to watch the community react to. Because again, this is a Switch exclusive thing, so it's not Microsoft trying to charge $70 for a first-party game on its own platform. But the fact that Bethesda is willing to charge $70 on
If you buy
Nintendo,
the upgrade separately, if you buy the upgrade separately, it's $20 on Switch.
Yep.
I wonder if it's something to do with the way add-ons are bundled or something. I don't know. It's really strange.
Because technically you're saving $10, Jez. You can spend $80, or you can buy the bundle for $70. So, pretty good deal, right?
It's very, very strange. But yeah, I haven't been able to lock down any kind of official reason for it. But at the end of the day, who wants to play Skyrim at 15 frames per second anyway?
You know, the toilet Skyrim experience.
You got Steam Deck.
That's true. That's
true, man. I play it on cloud. Yeah, Skyrim on xCloud. Surely it is, right?
It's got to be. I can't verify that, but it's got to be. It's got to be. And so, while we're on this topic, I want to ask you, because I've talked to other folks in the community about it to see where they stand, and I've seen very passionate takes and very firm stances on this. But do you think we'll start seeing Xbox experiment with $70 with some of its first-party releases?
I've long suggested, me and Miranda talked about this a bunch, but we've always kind of thought that if the industry moves towards $70, there'd probably come a point where Microsoft have to as well. You know, I said that for a long time, since the start of the gen, that I expected Microsoft to follow. You know, maybe this is the first sign of them following along with that. We need to wait and see what happens when, for example, if the ABK deal closes before Diablo 4 comes out, and Diablo 4 is $70, I think that kind of will tell you all you need to know about where Microsoft's headed with that stuff. I could see like some of their upcoming AAA games. I could see Starfield being $70, for example. I mean, is it available for pre-order already? Maybe it is.
Starfield?
Maybe
No.
it's Starfield, Xbox. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe next year's the year where they put things up to $70. But I think it's quite possible they will do it. But you know, I guess Game Pass, right? Game Pass, baby.
And again, if I'm being, not to say that Microsoft is cynical, but if I'm being a marketing person and I'm looking at the value proposition of Xbox Game Pass, on one hand, sure, $70 is less of a value for the a la carte purchase, but if a lot of your biggest games, like a Starfield, Diablo 4, Call of Duty, those are $70, that only increases the value proposition for Xbox Game Pass. And I'm of the mindset that, you know, when this Activision Blizzard deal goes through, I don't see them dropping the price of Call of Duty. I don't think they're going to say, well, we've been charging $70 and now we're not. Quite frankly, as much as I would love Microsoft to be nice and just do that, as we've seen with Xbox Gold, they want to make money. And if they're already making money, they're not going to just stop making that money. It's just, they're a business. That's their whole entire objective, is to make money. Sure, you need to have compelling services, compelling games to get that money. But I don't see them being like, guess what? All of the Activision stuff that was going to be $70 is $60. Yay. I see them just like quietly being like, well, the Activision stuff's $70, so I guess ours, let's make Starfield $70. Let's make Everwild $70. Let's see what happens. See if people get mad.
Yeah. I'm willing to bet money that Starfield will be $70.
That's where I'm at.
That's not a leak. So don't take that as a leak.
You've been slothed.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to be $70, but my expectation, my speculation is that Starfield will be $70. But it's on Game Pass.
It's on Game Pass. And there's going to be a lot of people who were very vocal about The Last of Us being very quiet about Starfield being $70. I can guarantee that, if that's the case. So again, it is interesting. Whether or not it's warranted, I think those conversations are still worthwhile, still interesting. Do publishers, quote unquote, need to charge $70 to make money? We've seen them branch out with other in-game monetization, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't have all of the logistical information for each individual release, and I hope that Microsoft doesn't do just a blanket. Like, all of our first-party games are 70. I really think all publishers need to move away from that idea, because the reality is all of these games have different scopes, have different budgets, and a blanket $70 price point isn't fair to the consumer, and it's not fair to the project as well. Because then you're, again, by putting a $70 price tag on everything, it sets this expectation that everything's going to be a Starfield, for example. And when something isn't a Starfield and it's $70, then people are going to be going online and saying, this was a $10 game and it was $70. This is trash. But so I'm hoping Microsoft is, while I expect them to have $70 games, I am also kind of expect them to be more willing to be flexible with price points, as we've seen with Pentiment, which is $20. So do that. Let's normalize that. It's okay for games to be different prices. Jez, everyone's focused on the Activision Blizzard King acquisition. Microsoft is focused on the Activision Blizzard King acquisition. Most of the games industry is focused on that acquisition. But Microsoft has also made it abundantly clear that they can't slow down. They're not done. They are constantly looking towards what's next, whether it be developers, publishers. They want to make sure that they are the big dogs on campus. They really are gunning for that number one spot, and they have the budget and the commitment to do it. So this isn't entirely new information per se, but coming off of Tokyo Game Show 2022 and Phil Spencer addressing a solid showing, but also saying we still have work to do. I thought that was really fascinating, that despite having a good showing, despite having some momentum, he was quick to discredit. I don't want to say discredit. He was quick to look towards the future, look towards what's next, identify that there are big glaring issues. And I thought that was interesting. And so on a recent episode of the Giant Bomb Bombcast, Imran Khan shared some insights about what he's heard regarding Xbox and Japan. So he has suggested that Microsoft has been talking to major publishers as well as a host of different developers when it comes to acquisitions. And Microsoft has been planting those seeds for a little while now and trying to, again, establish itself, trying to build those relationships, foster those relationships, and make Xbox a legitimate force in Japan. We know Japan has been a focus for Xbox. They've demonstrated that in a lot of ways. They've talked about that frequently. So when we look at these comments, what have you heard regarding Xbox's plans for Japanese expansion?
I mean, from my sources and sourcing and stuff, it's pretty much what's already out there. I haven't heard anything extra, additional, supplementary. So, I can't add any weight to what I can't add any weight to what's been out there and what's been said. But I mean, it's just kind of obvious, right? I think there's potentially like two scenarios I can see. Maybe they're looking at Japan as an alternative to what if the Activision Blizzard King deal fails. Maybe they immediately pivot and try and buy a Sega or a Capcom. Take all that money that was earmarked for Activision and just throw it at Capcom, or throw it at Sega, or throw it at both of them. Throw it at Square Enix, and really twist the knife, right? So maybe that's one aspect of it. But I also think Microsoft really just wants to diversify its appeal. And a lot of that comes from, I think, Netflix DNA. A lot of the people that are sort of shaping the strategy of Game Pass, they were from Netflix, and Netflix goes very broad. It caters aggressively to different niches, and a show that might be super popular in Japan or India or Australia or Britain might not necessarily be that popular in America, but it also helps that platform be dominant in that region, right? So I think like Microsoft's mentality is probably like, okay, we're going to have a game every quarter, but now we need the big exclusive that appeals to this market. We need the big exclusive that appeals to that market. We need a big exclusive that appeals to this, blah, 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 blah. We've got Anglo-centricity on lock, but, now we need games that appeal to, the Japanese gamer, or a game that appeals to, Korean gamer and stuff like that. And I know Microsoft has been, aggressively expanding its administrative business base in Southeast Asia, and in the far east and towards Japan. So once the Activision Blizzard deal is finished, either it goes through or it doesn't. It does seem like the next port of call is probably Japan. But I also think Microsoft will be looking at support studios. I can totally see them buying Certain Affinity. And we're going to talk about Halo Infinite here in a bit. But, Certain Affinity's been, hard at work supporting Halo for very many years now. Max Hoberman left Bungie, if I remember right, to found Certain Affinity and carry on working on Halo and other games in a sort of support capacity, right? And Certain Affinity, from what I understand and what I've been told, they're extremely good at what they do, And if there's one thing Microsoft probably needs in our brave new remote working world, it's studios that are set up for remote working, So yeah, I can totally see it happen. I haven't got anything hard, concrete details. These kind of conversations are very hush hush and very, private and stuff. So, I wouldn't necessarily be privy to what's being said, but it just makes a lot of sense. And I think Microsoft's pretty much hinted as such publicly as well. So yeah.
Yeah, again, this isn't entirely new information because we have people involved with the head of publishing in Japan. Japanese-focused Xbox publishing folks coming out and saying that they have big projects on the horizon. So again, that's not entirely new information. I've reached out to some of those folks via DMs. I've shot some of those folks targets as well. Little developers I think would be interesting, and it's cool to speak to them and hear back and say, oh, that is a cool target for us. And we do have some really cool things in the works. So again, I also can't add to that, but we do know that Microsoft is working on things behind the scenes, and they have been for years. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes to fruition with that, because, again, Xbox wants to be a global brand, and they want to be everywhere. They want to appeal to everyone as much as possible, and a lot of that, like you touched on, is delivering games for specific markets. Not all markets are the same. We're in the West. We think about us, what we want, what people in the West want. That's all that matters. And that's not the reality of the world and people's tastes. And Microsoft, thankfully, understands that, and they're trying to diversify, and they're trying to branch out. So I am really excited. I've been really happy with the way that Xbox has taken Japan seriously. I've reported on this previously, but that moment where Phil Spencer came out on stage and talked about Japan, I think that is really important, because regardless of how much you love Xbox or how little you care about whatever JRPGs brand, it's still a very important market for a lot of people, and it's still a very important place to be established when we look at gaming. And we know people like Phil Spencer love gaming, constantly praise Nintendo, constantly praise the industry, and they understand that Japanese legacy and history is fundamentally important to gaming, and they want to be involved with that, and that's really exciting. Square Enix has also come out and talked about how, with their new approach and with games being too expensive, that they need to have people fund projects, have people help publish projects. So that being said, do you think Xbox jumps on board and tries to collab with Square in a more serious way? Because as we've seen, Square isn't that interested in Xbox. Square has not really cared to put most of its games on Xbox, yet Sarah Bond at Tokyo Game Show specifically listed Square Enix as a partner. So do you think there's a world where they've maybe already been talking to Square or are looking to work with Square and say, all right, you want a team to work on a game, or you want somebody to help you publish this game? Let's go. Square X Xbox collab?
I know that Microsoft is pretty adamant on trying to crack Square Enix and build a better working relationship with them. That's one thing I do know. The whole thing with Final Fantasy 14 is an ongoing saga. Phil Spencer said Final Fantasy 14 was on the way to Xbox at one point.
At one point, yes.
I don't know if he misspoke or if he thought of a different game or something, but evidently Final Fantasy 14 is not coming to Xbox right now. And I think part of that is honestly not necessarily because Square Enix is being an assholes to Xbox. I think the truth about that is it's a lot of investment and risk to bring an MMO to a new platform. When Square Enix launched the latest expansion, Endwalker, for Final Fantasy 14, their servers went down for weeks.
Yeah.
Not days, for weeks. They had server problems, capacity issues. Add a whole new platform into the mix, and you're looking at more server issues and more capacity problems and stuff like that. And also, when you're also looking at and adding another version into the game, it gets exponentially more complicated, and especially because Xbox's policies around updates isn't conducive to the way an MMO needs to be updated. It needs to be updated on all platforms at the same time. They can't just wait for Microsoft to certify it, which is why Sony, and obviously on PC, they don't have to wait to push an update. Sony just lets them update the game themselves without any involvement whatsoever. Microsoft's policy is that every update has to be signed off by them, which has been a problem in the past.
Yes.
Don't know if it still is now. And I think one of the things Microsoft said at one of their developer events a year ago or 2 years ago was that they were going to allow for different delivery systems for updates, which to me was like, okay, that eliminates a barrier to Final Fantasy 14's update criticisms that they used to have. So I think ultimately it's a very, very big project, at least with regards to Final Fantasy 14, but that's something Microsoft could reach out and offer to help them with. They can offer to help them with servers. They could offer to invest and offset the risks. And Square Enix is a very risk-averse company.
Yes.
They openly admit it. They say everything. We don't want risk. We don't want risk. We want companies to invest in us and offset our risks. Microsoft could do that, and I think they probably are making those conversations to potentially make that happen. But there's been some flickers of some very vague examples of support. We get in Final Fantasy 7, I can't remember the name of it.
Crisis Core.
Crisis Core. We're getting that on Xbox for some reason. We got DLC Chronicle, which is terrible.
We're getting Star Ocean, which
kind of
people are not super stoked on the demo, it sounds like. So
yeah, and we got Octopath Traveler, which
one.
Yeah, one.
Octopath Traveler 1, but for now, not the sequel. But yeah, it's interesting. And you touched on Xbox's update situation, which I think is a problem for the platform because, like you said, as more games have crossplay and as more games look towards integrating all of these different services and all of these different ecosystems, there are so many times where the Xbox version is like a week behind for an update. Saints Row, I know that game was kind of a mess in a lot of ways. There was a hotfix that came out on PC and PlayStation, the first hotfix. It didn't come till Xbox until 2 weeks later. Because of certification. Evil Dead the game, also similar situation. Like the update came to every single platform but Xbox for an additional week. And so again, there are some hurdles with the way that Xbox handles themselves. And Square, again, there's plenty to criticize with Square. Their business model is all over the place, like you touched on, hyper risk aversive. And in the world of gaming, that can be a huge conflict because a lot of the biggest successes in a lot of ways have been huge risks. And Square is not willing to do that. Square is like crunching the numbers for every single release. And if they can't justify every single dollar, Xbox doesn't get a port. Switch doesn't get a port. They are so wildly inconsistent with all of their releases. And that's why I think they are primed, or Xbox is primed to step in and say, all right, you're struggling. You're struggling to, justify ports. You're struggling to get investment. Here you go. Xbox is investing in you. And I think that would solidify Xbox versions of these games at the very least. And maybe, hopefully, stabilize Square's strategy a little bit, because it's, again, Xbox is the worst by far, but even on Switch, it's not consistent. All right, I got to give a quick shout out to the 300 people joining us live for Xbox Chaturdays. If you are digging the show, hit the like button, share it out. We're going to be diving into some concerns regarding this Activision from Sony and Google. Because of Microsoft's recent acquisition spree, Microsoft's, they've been throwing around a lot of money. Bethesda, when that came out, people were like, 7.5 billion. That's crazy. That's so much money. And then the next year, oh my God, 70 billion. What the hell? And so a lot of people, whether it's justified or not, whether their, motivations are self-driven or not, people are a little bit concerned about that spending. One particular body that's very concerned about that spending is PlayStation. And they've been very vocal. They've been cheering from the sidelines as people say they're going to investigate the deal and scrutinize the deal. Jim Ryan's been very vocal about what it means for the gamers, Jez. Won't you think of the gamers? Because
think of the gamers.
PlayStation is here to protect the gamers, and Microsoft hates gamers. That's why they're doing this. They're buying Call of Duty to shut down Call of Duty. They're just buying it to take it away from everyone as part of their master plan. A report from Deal Reporter this week says that Jim Ryan actually flew out to Brussels on September 8th to meet with the European Union and voice the company's concerns about this deal. So PlayStation has a huge foothold in Europe. It's safe to say they are the dominant force in Europe in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
What's your read on PlayStation's strategy here? Because before this deal, they were loud and proud about how strong they were. They had the best exclusives in the industry, the best ecosystem, the best console. And their stock has been taking some hits. Their stock has been taking a beating. And part of that, I feel like, is PlayStation is coming off as very helpless in this situation. They have been very, I don't want to say weak, but I'll say it. They've been very weak when it comes to how they've been handling this potential acquisition. So what do you think PlayStation and Jim Ryan are hoping the outcome of this is?
I think Jim Ryan, kind of like tap dancing Jim Ryan, as Rand calls him. I think they don't want this to go to court. I think if this goes to court, it's going to be a bloodbath. And I think Sony knows it. I think deep down, Sony knows if it goes to court, it's going to be a bloodbath. All of Sony's shady practices will be exposed. Their cross-play
I'm here for that juice. I'm here for the drama, boy.
Yeah. All that stuff. The cross-play tax, undermining Game Pass, adding clauses to contracts saying, like, you can't advertise this, that it's coming to Game Pass, or you can't mention Game Pass, or Game Pass this, Game Pass that. All these sort of anti-competitive clauses that Sony sort of makes. And maybe Microsoft makes them too. Neither company wants all this stuff out in the open because it's going to be a PR nightmare.
Yes.
Like, even the fact that, like, in the Apple versus Epic Games court case, we got a huge amount of details on Sony's business practices, even though Sony wasn't even a subject of the court case. If Sony is the subject of the court case, because you have to assume that if it does get blocked, Microsoft will sue on appeal, and then it will go to court. Sony's going to be called up as a complainant, complainter, whatever. I'm getting really tired now. I can't even think of words anymore. They're going to be called up as a witness or whatever, for making complaints about it. And then Microsoft's going to respond, well, these are all Sony's business practices. per our
Just
deals with
lay
them
it
for
out.
Minecraft,
Oh
or
yeah.
per our deals with them for Minecraft Dungeons and all the other games Microsoft publishes on PlayStation. So I don't think Sony wants it to go to court. I think they sort of like maybe they're hoping for some kind of concession they can win without it going to court, or some kind of ruling, or maybe they just want to show to the shareholders that they're not taking it lying down. But I think they desperately don't want it to go to court, and I think deep down they know it's going to go through. And I don't think it's a really big deal. I think it's just another one of them sort of things. But maybe there's some kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory going worth thinking about, that like maybe Google and Sony are behind the scenes lining up to bring some kind of cloud sort of play against Xbox. But then if that was true, I don't think that would have shut down Stadia anyway,
Yeah, it
because
does make sense.
Destiny's one of the most played games on Stadia. There's about all 5 people playing Destiny on Stadia. So Stadia fans hate me, by the way. When Stadia was killed, I got like a load of mentions from random people I'd never even met, who were just like, one guy was like, "It's your tweets that contributed
You
to
did
Stadia's
this.
death."
You
Yeah.
killed it.
Like all my trolling about Stadia. It's like some people really were not happy with that. But for all my trolling, I didn't want to see Stadia die, but
Wanted to
it's
be better.
Google.
The business model
it was
was just,
inevitable.
again, we touched on it. It was just terrible.
Yeah, we touched on it, but yeah, I'd feel like if Google and Stadia were going to team up, Google and Sony, sorry, were going to team up, I don't think they would have killed Stadia. Maybe they just would have rebranded it as PlayStation Stadia or something. I don't know, and sort of made it a whole partnership thing. So it's in chat say Stadia dying is revenge for Windows Phone. Yeah, that's pretty much where my trolling comes from, because Google blocked YouTube on Windows Phone, which is anti-competitive as hell. But they did it. They pretty much killed Windows Phone by blocking all the apps that Microsoft made for YouTube and other services. So since then I've had this endless vindictive streak against Google.
Jez has been out for blood since then.
Yeah, I'm out for blood, and I'll take that to my grave. But
they took something that Jez loved, all right, and for that they must pay. They must pay the ultimate.
They must pay. But anyway.
So it's interesting. Again, I don't think it's that surprising that Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, met with the European Union to talk about this. I don't necessarily think that means they're conspiring with the European Union to shut it down. It's probably Jim just trying to get in their ear and say, hey, these are the things you should look for. These are the things that, could potentially, it will impact us in this way, and it could impact others in this way. But again, this is a big deal. And if you're PlayStation, and if you put a lot of money in Call of Duty, why would you want this to go through? But you do bring up interesting points about if this goes to court. And we see those documents because the Elon Musk trial has been going on, and we've seen text messages from Elon Musk, and I gotta say that's juicy. As someone who's not a big fan of Elon Musk, seeing his dirtbag texts come out, ooh man, oh it's so good. And so if PlayStation, this is something I've talked about before, because this is a common conspiracy I see online. If PlayStation has used its number one position to bully people into specific business deals or bully people into situations, that's going to come back and bite them in the ass hard. And the second that they are not number one, the second that they are not in that top spot, all of these people who felt slighted, felt forced to do things they weren't comfortable with, resented the money they had to give PlayStation, they are going to look at PlayStation and say, now we don't need you. You're not the top dog anymore. We don't need to work with you in the same way that we did before. And that's just going to be this cascading effect of negative relationships for PlayStation. And so I would love to see some of that stuff come out. Again, we all want the confirmation of those things just so we know. We have our, our conspiracies. We have our theories. But until we have it in documentation, it's hard to say definitively that, PlayStation's evil or whatever people want to say. But
it's just business. It's just business.
Yeah, and business can be scummy. That's where I'm at.
It can be scummy.
It can be when money's involved, people are not typically at their best. Say that. You mentioned Google. You mentioned Google and PlayStation potentially collaborating on a streaming service. But Google has also come out, according to this report, and voiced their concerns. But their concerns don't lie with Call of Duty, where it seems like PlayStation, that is their primary concern, or at least what they've vocalized as their primary concern. But Google is curious about cloud infrastructure and some other ecosystem-based things, and has levied concerns about whether or not anyone can compete. As I asked you earlier, now that Stadia has closed its doors, Stadia could be in a position to say that we felt like we couldn't compete with Microsoft because of the money that they were spending in the space. We had to show we're one of the biggest tech companies in the world. We have more money than we have more money realistically than most people, and we couldn't even compete. So
we have more money than God.
So what is poor Joe Schmo going to do? If big giant Google can't do anything, how can anyone? So again, I'm not saying that that's the reality, because as we've touched on, I both think we agree that Google didn't commit in the way that they needed to. And I don't think it's a matter of they didn't have the money or resources. They just didn't allocate that money and resources. But they are now in a position to say, well, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. So we feel like this could potentially impact competition in the space. Do you think PlayStation and Google levying their concerns has any sort of weight on whether or not this deal goes through?
I think it's gonna maybe create an enhanced investigation or whatever they call it, but there's just no legal basis to stop this from happening. Like, shareholders want it. They voted 97%, and they own the company. The shareholders own the company, right? They voted for it. So that gives a lot of weight to making it happen. There's millions, billions of dollars at stake here. The employees probably want it to happen, frankly. You know,
I've spoken to people behind the scenes who've shared that sentiment.
They want Kotick gone, you know. So the employees want it to happen. Gamers want it to happen. It's the only way we get games like Prototype or Spyro or Guitar Hero, StarCraft. You know, some of these dormant Activision franchises.
Hawk
It's the
Pro
only way
Skater
we get some of these back. Yeah, exactly. It's the only way they can get some of this stuff revived. So everybody really wants it. There's no the only reason to block this is to protect Sony's profit margins.
Boo.
And political ideology. You know, because there is like this rush, this trend amongst certain affiliate politicians in America. Tech monopolies are bad, and tech monopolies are bad.
They definitely, generally speaking, can be.
Yeah, like I know in America, you have very, very poor competition in broadband, for example, and you have entire counties or states where there's pretty much only one broadband option, which is why you get a terrible service and you get high prices.
Yeah,
but
you either get internet or you don't, and that's it. That's your option.
Yeah. So, but my mentality is they're going to take that thinking of like, oh yeah, Amazon having dominance in online retail is bad, and because they get to treat their workers bad because there's no competition for employers, and therefore, you know, that means we should block the Activision Blizzard deal because tech monopoly is bad, you know, even though like when you actually look at it and get into the weeds, it isn't bad. But at the surface level, politicians are dumb, you know, and they're just gonna think of it like, how does this look in a headline? If I'm Joe Biden or whatever, you know, and I'm out here saying tech monopoly's bad, and then I allow the Activision Blizzard deal to happen, how does that look in a headline? It makes me look like a hypocrite. And I think that's how politicians often think. They don't think like, what's the reality of the situation they hear? They think, how is this going to affect voter perception? You know, they don't think about what's actually good a lot of the time. It doesn't matter whether you're right or left, Democrat, Republican, Green Party, whatever. You know, there's just sort of there's a hard limit on how, like, when regulation becomes, you know, problematic. You know, So regulation is obviously very important, and we can go into a very philosophical discussion about it.
Yeah.
But it's like regulation in water cleanliness and air pollution. I don't think regulation over Call of Duty is that important. It's just a shooter, and it's just kind of like that. That's like where I think about it, and some of my concerns about like a politician's going to block this on ideological grounds rather than what is actually good for the employees, for the gamers, and the shareholders. I ain't got any shares. I don't own any shares in anything. But at the end of the day, the shareholders do own the company, and they're being offered a lot of money. And for a government to come out and say, well, you can't have that because we need to protect Sony's profits.
Yeah, you can't sell what you own. Sorry.
That's sort of overreaching the role of a regulator, in my opinion.
I like I've touched on this before. As you touched on as well, I don't think there's a lot of legal red flags for the reason this couldn't go through. I think a lot of these people, I think, do have legitimate questions, and those questions come from a place of a deal like this has never happened before, and we're also kind of unfamiliar with the video games industry as a whole, because you don't see a lot of these conversations come up in the video game space. And this isn't something that's happened until very recently, so it's escalated. And people are in this position where they need to learn a lot of information really fast. And so if you have a PlayStation come to you and say, well, you should be concerned about this, and you have somebody else, Google, come to you and say, well, you should be concerned about this, and then, maybe there are genuine concerns there. But that being said, when we look at this deal and we compare this deal to any other media, film, television, anything else, where the concerns for monopoly are dramatically more severe than in the games industry so far, I still think that this deal has a very, very likely chance to go through. And I think once people have those questions answered, things will be fine. But Microsoft in this position is going to need to make sure they have answers for every single question. And if they can give them satisfactory answers, I think we'll be okay. And I think Microsoft knows that. We've seen Satya be very confident in this deal going through and making some very confident statements about the deal going through. So I think they, behind the scenes, have the answers that they're expecting to be asked. And I don't think it's going to be an issue. But again, the Googles of the world, the PlayStations of the world, they are competing directly with Microsoft. And as you touched on, this isn't about whether or not this impacts their business, because that is ideally the goal of a competitive market, is to have disruptive forces come in and make you change your business model or have the potential to take money from you. I don't think that inherently, when we look at capitalism, and again, we could have a whole philosophical debate on capitalism. I have plenty of thoughts on that. But when we look at the system of capitalism right now, there's nothing inherently evil or nefarious, I think, about this deal going through. And I think Microsoft will be able to convince regulatory bodies that that is the case. And then Jim Ryan will be very sad. He'll be very sad about his Call of Duty. With that being said, we got to talk about something that I always joke about not wanting to talk about, but then there's always something that we have to talk about, and that's Halo Infinite, Jez. Because no matter what, Halo Infinite cannot stay out of the conversations, and generally speaking, it's not in the conversations for any good reasons. There's been a lot of constant negativity surrounding Halo Infinite, and everyone who knows me knows I don't like to fixate on it. I get accused of dooming every now and then, but no, I would rather talk about something else. But there have been some big developments this week, and there have been some big rumors and speculation about the future of Halo Infinite that are absolutely worth discussing. And so you've commented on these reports previously, but for people unaware, there was a YouTube creator, Sean W., who has listed some massive changes. If you watch his video, this is a combination of things that he says he's heard and a combination of speculation. I will try to distinguish those as we go through here. So, Firstly, Sean suggests the possibility of Halo Infinite changing engines for future campaign content and the long-rumored Battle Royale mode that we've discussed potentially being developed by Certain Affinity, Project Tatanka, if you will. They're talking. He also talks about the rumored issues of the Slipspace engine and speculates that because of this transition to Unreal, Project Tatanka could come as late as 2024 or 2025. So let's talk about that first, Jez, because I know this was making the rounds. This got slothed, and you initially came out and said, "No, this isn't true." So when we're talking about a potential shift to an engine, I know you've been doing some digging. I know you've been looking behind the scenes to get some answers here. What's the possibility of Halo Infinite changing engines from Slipspace to Unreal?
When I first saw this, I was like, "There's just no way," because I have the documents that suggest that Tatanka was supposed to incorporate Forge, supposed to incorporate your progression from Halo Infinite. So to me, that sounded like it was a mode, a part of Halo Infinite. So I wrote it off immediately, and I was just like, "This is just, because I always hear this sort of desire from fans to get rid of Slipspace and go to something like Unreal. Like, I see that narrative all the time. So I just thought it was just a 4chan post or a Reddit post, anonymous sort of thing. And I just sort of scanned through it and I said it was BS, But then, like, I actually drank a coffee and looked at it properly. And Sean W reached out to me and he made some very compelling arguments and provided some very compelling information. And I did some digging on my own. And, one of the things that isn't public information is that David Berger, who made the Slipspace engine, he's no longer at 343 and he went with Bonnie Ross. So when you actually look at it, it kind of feels like there could really be something to this. I haven't been able to lock down hard confirmation, but honestly, right now, I'm inclined to believe it.
This is something that Rand and I have joked about behind the scenes because again, I'm not here to poop on Halo Infinite, but there's no world where this is a unanimously successful launch for Halo Infinite. Regardless of if you enjoy the game or not, I do enjoy the game. I reviewed it positively, the multiplayer side at launch. Really do like the core fundamentals of Halo. But I think with these constant delays, with these constant issues, Rand and I have joked about Halo Infinite being Destiny, where Destiny was marketed as having a 10-year life, quote unquote. And then after a couple years, they go, oop, okay, just kidding. Destiny 2 on the horizon. So now I'm almost, if these rumors of a new engine are true, I'm almost wondering if we're going to see Halo Infinite : let's say the rumored Eternals. And that's actually, that's something different. That is a different thing. If this entire engine is different, do you think there's a world where we get kind of a pseudo sequel to Halo Infinite instead of this just consistent continued support?
And
if this whole thing is a mess, and this is just speculation, but
this is just speculation. But this is speculation, and I haven't locked down a hard report. I haven't locked down enough data else to make a hard report right now. But the way I'm seeing the gears shift, and I really do think Sean W. There's some speculation in there, like Sean W. said, Shannon Loft,
Bonnie Ross,
Bonnie Ross. I was like, Shannon Loftus, Kiki Wolfkill, no, Bonnie Ross, Sarah Bond. And you can tell I'm getting tired now. But Bonnie Ross, he speculated that Bonnie Ross could come back and run Activision Blizzard King. I don't think that's going to happen, personally. But a lot of the stuff he said about Sean W. said about Halo Infinite, I really don't think you can't have smoke without fire. And I actually think it's true now. I think there has been a massive change in direction, and this is speculation. But I believe Sean W.'s report. I think that probably has been a massive change in direction. I think like maybe they are moving Tatanka to a standalone game, and it's no longer going to be part of the Slip Space stuff. Maybe it's going to be a completely standalone experience, spin-off even. Maybe the Endless as well is going to be, the Endless trademark, which we all thought was going to be a story expansion for Halo Infinite. Maybe that's going to end up being a spin-off as well. Maybe that's going to be like an ODST kind of experience, kind of thing, separate, but sort of to cap off the story. Because 343 has had a huge amount of upheaval over the last couple of years. We saw Joseph Staten come in. We've seen other ex-Bungie developers come in, and now we've seen Bonnie Ross exit. We've seen David Berger exit, and I think a lot of these changes they revolve around a complete change in direction. So I think, like, ultimately, a lot of the stuff that Sean W said makes total sense, and I think, based on what I've been investigating this week, I think it could be true. I think it definitely could be true. So,
It's
what that means for Halo Infinite is, I suppose it's if it is true, and again, this isn't a report. I don't have hard confirmation, but if it is all true, and there is a significant change in direction, I feel like it's being done because it's the best solution right now. Everything I've heard about Slipspace is that it has terrible tools, and that it takes a really long time to train someone up on it, which makes it hard to run it as a live service. So I think, like, they still like the idea of Halo as a live service, but Slipspace ain't the engine that's going to make that happen. It's that's what it sounds like to me. So yeah, Issa says the engine ain't the problem. It's the 18-month rotating contract that Microsoft enforces. None of the knowledge intelligent is retained. I mean, yeah, that is an issue as well. But if they were on a real engine, which is ubiquitous in development and sort of like is sort of conducive to that contractor environment, then we don't have to worry about that issue. It might just be the cold-hearted pragmatism of switching to Unreal Engine would ensure that they can get experienced developers, contractors in straight away to build out the live service that they envision Halo Infinite to be. So I think that's where we are with Halo Infinite right now. Until there's some like hard confirmation on my end or one of the other, or like just it's just multiple points of confirmation. But honestly, based on what little I've been able to scrape together, I think Sean W is probably right.
It's really starting to seem like that is a distinct possibility, where we have, obviously, Forge is going to be in Slipspace. Obviously, there's this foundation, and it's going to be a question of how long is that supported. Obviously, Forge is going to allow a lot of freedom for teams, for the community to come in and create content, and that in of itself will be exciting, will be interesting, will sustain the game to some degree. And I think they're really banking on Forge doing that in the interim. But if Slipspace does have a deep learning curve, and you are relying on contractors, that means every contractor that comes in has to learn this engine. And there's this hurdle. And then every single time you get someone new, there's this brief period where they can't actually develop anything because they're trying to figure out the engine. And like you said, if they switch to something more universal, like an Unreal, people have the fundamentals for that. They could come in, they could iterate on that. And again, there has been some criticism about the contractor approach. I do agree with a lot of it. If you are 343 Industries, if you are Microsoft, and this really was planned to be a 10-year game, I don't understand why there wasn't more permanent staff brought on. But again, that is a different conversation. So now we're in a position where we have potentially two divergent Halo experiences. We have Project Tatanka, which I assume at this point that will be standalone. At this point, again, this is speculation, but I assume that will be completely standalone, separate from the Halo Infinite package, especially if that is coming later than we thought. That's just going to be here. This is going to be our war zone. Much like Warzone, it's a separate client, separate download, separate experience. And then, like you said, I am almost envisioning the campaign expansion to be that ODST, where it is a standalone thing, quote unquote, within that complements the Halo Infinite experience. And do you think that's going to be an absolute nightmare if that is the case? Are we going to have 3 separate clients? We're going to have a Battle Royale client, we're going to have the Halo Infinite client, and we're going to have the Project Tatanka client? What is that going to look like?
I mean, it needn't be a nightmare because, you know, Hitman, for example, Hitman and Call of Duty, they have like an integrated UI that lets you jump between clients pretty easily with a shortcut, right?
Yeah.
And in the era of SSDs where, you know, game boot load speeds have sort of been cut significantly, I don't think it's so much of a big deal. And some of the stuff with Tatanka, like if Tatanka is on Unreal, presumably they can bring some of your progression from Infinite in by using the Halo social API and just sort of like linking the slip space asset to the Unreal asset.
Yes.
And porting them across. Like, so, because like it's just going to be like textures and 3D models, you know, and there'll probably be some work involved, sure, or a lot of work involved. But like, there's no reason why they can't tie the progression from the Unreal version of Tatanka to Halo Infinite, marrying it over the Halo social API graph or whatever you call it. So there's that aspect of it, but I suppose like some of the other stuff, like, you know, the Forge integration, I presume might be the part that you lose with Tatanka.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of like if Tatanka is actually like really good and it's built on Unreal Engine, which allows them to iterate in a similar pace to Fortnite, does it even need Forge, you know? So it's sort of like, it's interesting to think about the way it goes, but ultimately it doesn't matter as long as the games end up being good, because, you know, Halo fans are long suffering, and Halo needs to be at that level, that sort of top level. And if the Unreal Engine's the way to do it, then so be it, you know.
Yeah, I think
it works for Gears of War, right?
Yeah, Gears has consistently been the showcase. I love Gears. Gears is still, when it comes to shooters, my number one. That's like my main competitive shooter. So I would be absolutely fine. I think Slip Space feels good. I was really impressed with the overall physics of Halo Infinite. And so I'd be really curious. I see people in the chat talking about how it would feel different. So do you think they would be able to deliver an experience that's close enough in a Project Tatanka, for example, and a Halo Infinite? So if you're jumping between the two, there isn't this obvious difference in the way the game feels and handles?
Well, you know, I thought about that, you know, but like I remember how you know, other games have sort of jumped from engine to engine and still managed to sort of claw back some of that feel. I think, you know, like Fortnite doesn't feel like Gears of War, does it?
No.
You know, they're both Unreal Engine, and, you know, State of Decay doesn't feel like, you know, some other Unreal Engine game. I think like it probably just makes a lot of sense from a pure pragmatical point of view. We always hear about how the Coalition are the masters of the Unreal Engine. Like, they're up there with Epic Games themselves for that engine. They've got mature in-house tools for that engine. They are sharing their expertise and their tool sets with Undead Labs, who are working on State of Decay 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to expect that the support that Microsoft Studios that are using Unreal is getting from the Coalition, and that sort of expertise is spreading around Microsoft now. It kind of just, it's probably gotten to a point where it's just like, screw it. Let's just put everything on Unreal. You know, the Coalition has proven that this is the engine we should be using. And yes, there's overheads involved because we have to pay Epic Games.
Yep.
But that also keeps Microsoft in political good standing with Epic Games, who are a very powerful company, So there's benefits to being having a good business relationship with Epic Games, So for me, the more you think about it, the more it just makes sense, from Microsoft's perspective and maybe the future of Halo, It's just important that they do retain that Halo feel, because a lot of what makes Halo is the feel. There's no other game that feels like it. But
and that's why
Slip
previous
Space
Halos
didn't always exist.
Previous Halos didn't use Unreal either, which is an important thing to know as well. And again, Unreal, especially Unreal 5, we don't really know what its full capabilities are, and we can't really say right now there would be no way for them to go in and tune this experience to feel like the Slip Space engine, and to feel, and maybe they get it, so they've magically created an experience where you can't even fundamentally tell the difference between the overall physics experience between that, but their developers can come in and iterate on things significantly faster, which is that is what they are struggling with right now, is they cannot get content out close to fast enough with this engine, according to, again, people who've used it, people who've spoken about it, and a lot of the rumors and speculation surrounding Slip Space. So that is going to be really interesting to see what that means, if anything, for the future of Halo. Obviously, a lot of this is rumors and speculation, but that being said, there's a lot of stuff, as you touched on, that points to a shift in the focus, priorities, and future of Halo. I think there's going to be some big shakeups, more so than what we've seen already in terms of how Halo Infinite's content offerings handle themselves moving forward. One other thing I wanted to touch on real quick as part of this rumor is he mentioned Bobby Kotick, and he was saying that post Sean W. in this case was saying that post this acquisition, that homie Bobby is still involved with Activision. So I'll just ask you point blank, is there a world where Bobby Kotick stays involved with Microsoft?
I don't think so. I think maybe part of the deal that we don't know about, maybe there's some kind of retainer. Maybe there's like Kotick's allowed to stay on for a year or two to transition and maybe sort of clear up his image and legacy or something. Maybe there's something like that, but I can't see Kotick staying long term. He'll get his golden parachute and sail off into the sunset. I don't think Microsoft wants Kotick there for a long period of time. I mean, Kotick's made Activision shareholders a lot of money.
Yep.
So he clearly knows how to play the game when it comes to chasing trends and, pivoting and however else, whatever he did, to make all that a reality. But he's adaptability is important in the tech business, and it kind of feels like as the focus was on adaptability and pivoting and trend chasing, a lot of the art has just been lost, and unfortunately art doesn't always pay dividends for shareholders.
Yep.
Which is why we've lost games like Prototype and StarCraft and stuff like that. But Microsoft's just shown itself to have a different sort of ideology, and I don't know if that ideology would match up with what Kotick's ideology is, which is trend chasing. Whereas Microsoft's more about like we need to cater to every niche. We need to bring StarCraft back. They brought Age of Empires back, for God's sake.
Let's
RTS
go, baby.
is as niche as it comes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I agree. They've already publicly said that Kotick will be involved to transition as they work through this deal. So I was expecting some period. I wasn't expecting that day one Bobby Kotick would be out the door, but I don't see him staying on as a permanent member of this company, because he is a conflict to what Microsoft has been pushing when it comes to acceptance and accessibility and all of these forward-thinking ideas. And Bobby Kotick, while he makes a lot of money for a lot of people, he's also been tied to some really ugly components of video games legacy, of the legacy of the video games industry. And so for Microsoft to try to just downplay that or pretend like that's not a thing, to me would just be this lingering ugly boil that's just on the side of Microsoft's face. If he manages to stay there, and I've talked about this before, that would be such a conflict to what Microsoft has been preaching for the last couple of years. And again, I understand he's going to get his golden parachute. There's probably a lot of legal and technical things protecting him because God bless the USA. If you work for a company, that company's shield will protect you from a lot of horrifying things. And that's just capitalism, baby. Let's go. For better or worse, that's just the way it works. So he's not going to get his comeuppance in the way that a lot of us would hope, but I really hope he's not just, hey, Bobby Kotick he's at Microsoft now. He's a key figure at Microsoft. I think that would be disappointing, to say the very least. All right, Jez. Well, I think that's it. I think that's it for today's episode of Xbox Chaturdays. So a huge shout out to everyone who tuned in live. If you dug the show, hit that like button. If you are listening to the audio versions of the show and you dug it, drop us a review as well. Jez, one more time for the lovely folks who joined us, let us know where they can find you.
Find me on windowscentral.com, which is a pretty cool website.
Oh,
you can also find me on Twitter at Jez Corden, JZCorden, and also on podcast services, the Xbox 2 podcast or XB2 podcast.
You and your boy Randall Thor 19.
Yes, and I'm a lot of people commenting that I seem tired and stuff. It's true. I'm tired. I'm hungover, but I didn't want to let Miles down, and I wanted to discuss this stuff because hopefully we gave you some good information and some insights, even though I was a bit worse for wear today. So I apologize for that, but I did my best.
I appreciate you powering through that spiced rum hangover to come on the show and talk about just a lot. There's been a lot, and I've been out of the loop. I've missed several weeks, so there's been a lot that I've had to just watch on the sideline. So it feels good to get out here and talk about all that stuff. And again, now that I'm back, now that I'm settled in, Xbox Chaturdays will be around every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Take care, everybody.